My name is Nico. I go by COINTrick and COINTRICktwitch online. And if you want to see more videos like this one, remember to like and subscribe and hit the bell so that you guys get notified whenever I upload new videos like these. I did a poll on YouTube, and you all told me you wanted to learn how to make a daiquiri, but specifically how to build a bar around making a daiquiri and mastering a daiquiri first. So I'm going to show you how to stock your bar to make a daiquiri, perfect that daiquiri recipe for yourself, then do different iterations on it with a few extra ingredients, and then learn new cocktails that only require 1 or 2 extra ingredients on top of what you might already have to make the daiquiri. And if you stick around at the end of this video, there's going to be some extra credit that will help your drink stick out amongst everyone else's. If you're more of a boozy, stirred cocktail person, no worries. We've already done videos on how to do this same thing with an old fashioned and with a Manhattan if you guys want to check those out on my channel. The original recipe for the daiquiri, the simplest recipe, most classic recipe for a daiquiri, like the old fashioned and the Manhattan, only has 3 ingredients. That's why it's one of the most ideal recipes to teach yourself and to master at home before you start building up a full bar with a bunch of different kinds of liquors and syrups and shrubs and things like that. So those 3 ingredients are white rum, lime juice, and simple syrup. If you don't have white rum and maybe you have spiced rum or black rum and you don't want to go out and get white rum, that's fine. But a white rum is going to make it easier to sort of figure out the dialing in the adjustments and really tasting what should be in your daiquiri. So the classic recipe is 2 ounces of rum, 1 ounce lime juice, and 1 ounce simple syrup. That recipe is what bartenders and mixologists would call a sour build. Basically, it's just a shorthand that we use for anything that is 2 parts its base liquor, 1 part sweetener, and 1 part sour. So the equipment that you're going to need to make the daiquiri, if you haven't gone out and gotten everything that I mentioned in my previous video about setting up all your tools and everything, don't worry. You're going to need some shakers, a strainer, a jigger or some other sort of small measuring utensil, a coupe or martini glass, and if you're going to do fresh juice, which I recommend that you do, you're going to need a knife and a juicer. So all ingredients in all cocktails really only fill 5 rolls. Sometimes one ingredient will pull double duty and do sweet and sour. But those rolls are liquor, lengthener, sweet, sour, and spice. So in the daiquiri, your base liquor is obviously your rum. Your sour is going to be your lime juice. Your sweetener is going to be your simple syrup. Your lengthener will be the dilution that you add to this when you shake it. And this recipe actually doesn't have any bitter components. Similar to how the Old Fashioned and the Manhattan also lacked sour components. All right, let's start with that original recipe. Two ounces of your white rum. An ounce of your simple syrup. And then an ounce of your lime juice. Put that in your shaker. Shake it up. I get asked a lot about what is like the appropriate amount of time to shake your cocktails, and it depends more on your method of shaking. I shake very aggressively, admittedly, and by all accounts. So if you shake like I do, you don't need to really shake it for that long or you'll over dilute it. But typically, I think when we're training people, I've told people like 10 to 15 seconds, depending on how vigorous your shake is. The strainer here. Looks right, looks good. If you want to take it a step further, you can use a fine strainer to make sure that you get all that extra pulp out. But I'm doing this for R&D, so I'm not trying to get it perfect the first time through. So we're going to taste it, and I'll give you guys some notes on it, and then we're going to walk you through how you can dial this in maybe it's perfect. No, it's not. It's not perfect. I almost feel like it's over diluted. Before I get too deep into this, I want to talk about dilution a little bit. So dilution is basically the measure of water that you have in your drink. Ideally, I think typically the ideal level of dilution is 20% of your final volume in water content. And you get that from your shaking or your stirring or topping off your drink with club soda or however you decide to add your dilution. In this instance, it comes from shaking it with the ice. Some of the ice melts into water, and that water ends up in your final drink. You want it there. It's supposed to be there. Because dilution helps your palate detect all of those small, nuanced flavors that you need for this drink to really stand out and not feel like a muddled mess of random junk that you put in a glass. I'm going to walk you through the 3 things that typically go wrong with this cocktail and how to detect them and how to fix them. Once you have your dilution sort of where you'd like for it to be and you have that consistent, the first thing that typically goes wrong is that your drink is too strong, or it has too much liquor, or it has too much heat. People have different words for all of these different things, but generally it just means that you have too much alcohol in your drink. You could either remake this with less liquor, you could take the one that you made and you could just add a little bit of ice to it, stir it around, add the dilution to see if that brings the heat down a little bit, lowers the average ABV. You could chill it down and that sort of tempers the heat that comes off of the alcohol on your palate. So the second thing that happens most commonly is that your drink is too sweet. But what's really important when you're talking about especially rum cocktails, because rum covers a very wide array of flavors, is that sweet can be different kinds of sweetness. You can be talking about sweet the way that candy is sweet, fruit is sweet, confection is sweet, dessert is sweet, or pastries are sweet. So with that in mind, the first thing, the most common version of this that goes wrong, especially if you followed this specific recipe, is that it's too candied sweet, which just means that you have too much actual sugar in your drink. You use too much syrup. You can either add ice to bring that dilution down, or you would have to just remake it with less syrup, which is what I would recommend that you do. The second most common kind of sweetness that might be throwing off your drink is if it feels like it's sweet the way that fruit is sweet. Typically, it's coming from the fruit that you've added in the drink. That would make the most sense, right? So especially if you've used key limes instead of Persian limes, which is fine because I don't imagine you have control over what you can find at the grocery store all the time. But if you're using small limes, very small concentrated limes, those are key limes, and those will have more of that fruity pastry sort of sweetness to them. And if that happens again, I'm not going to say go out and get different limes and hunt them down. Just go back and make it again with less syrup, or you can also add alcohol. So the most uncommon kind of extra sweetness that you might find in your drink that you might think is undesirable is that pastry, confection, sort of funky sweetness. And if you have that, it's probably because your rum was distilled in a pot still instead of a column still. We don't have time to get into what all of that means, but if you got a Jamaican rum or an agricole rum, it is 100% because of that. I've never really seen a daiquiri come out with that funkiness without being made of one of those two kinds of rums. So the solution for that is actually going to be to add acidity. So if you have a lime wedge garnished on the edge of your drink, just pinch that in there and that should fix that right up. So with this one, I almost feel like it's too sour. I feel like there's almost too much lime. But I like the level of sweetness. I think normally I only adjust one ingredient at a time, but I feel like I need to pull back both the lime and the syrup. But I'm a man of my word, so I'm going to do it the right way. I'm going to only adjust one of these. I'm going to lessen the lime, and we're going to see if that comes out better than the first time. Same bottles. You don't have to go back out to the store. I promise you, you can dial it in with whatever you had originally for this recipe. Woof. Seal it shut. Look at the consistency of it as you pour. That's the main reason to do a long pour. You don't really need to do it to aerate your drink or anything. Just to make sure that it looks the way it should as it's coming out. So, this one should have a little bit less acidity. It might come out too sweet, and if it does, that's fine. you shouldn't get it perfect the first or the second time. But let's try it out. Cheers, you guys. Yeah, that's better. It's bizarre. There's like a perceived amount of sweetness that's coming from the limes, which might just be because my limes are pretty fresh. All right, so step 3. Once you've made the original recipe and you've figured out how to dial it in and manipulate it for your specific taste or the specific tastes of your guests or friends and family, third step is going to be looking for similar ingredients to begin making variations on that original recipe. So what that means is that you're going to stay inside of those same categories, and you're not going to add things that are not already here, or you shouldn't have to. If you do want to do that, we'll cover that in the very next section, I promise. So the very first thing that you can swap out is you can try different kinds of liquors. And like I mentioned before, you want to stay in the same broad categories. So stick within the rum family. And if you started with white rum, it's going to be pretty easy because sky's the limit from there. All of the other kinds of rums, as far as I'm aware, are all going to be aged, dark, or spiced. So you have spiced rum like Captain Morgan or Sailor Jerry's. You have aged rum like Flor de Caña or Diplomatico. Jamaican rum like Appleton Estate. You can also try it with flavored rum if you want to, like pineapple flavored rum, which is what this plantation rum is. You can also find something like a banana flavored rum that I might recommend, like a Boom Boo. The second substitution that's going to be easy to make, meaning you can go out to the store and you can find these ingredients, you're not really going to have to take a whole lot of work, is swapping out the sweetener. So where normally you started with simple syrup, you could try something like agave, honey, molasses, maple syrup. The most important factors of your sweetening component is almost always going to be the sugar content, for obvious reasons, but also the turbidity, which is the measure of solid suspended in solution. But in general, the darker your liquid, the more turbidity it has, the more turbid it is. So something like molasses is going to be higher in turbidity, it's going to be darker than something like simple syrup. So with that being said, the lighter your liquid, the clearer your liquor should be. The darker your liquid, the safer it is to work with spiced, aged, or dark liquor. And so the third thing that you can do is you can swap out the sour component in your drink. It's kind of hard to do in a daiquiri because your sour component is pretty empirically simple. So there are two main kinds of limes that get used behind the bar. I've mostly used Persian limes, but some bars will have key limes or some blend of the two. So if you used one, you might want to try it with the other one, especially like I mentioned before, if your drink is a little bit too sweet and you had key limes, you may want to just try it with Persian limes. But if you want to omit the limes altogether and work with a completely different ingredient, you can find lime cordial. If you're wondering what a cordial is, it's basically sweetened fruit juice is the simplest way to talk about it. The most complicated way to describe it would be to call it a macerated, acidulated, sweetened fruit solution. Basically somewhere between your juice and your syrup, which means if you go out and you get Rose's lime cordial, you're going to want to cut way back on the simple syrup or not use it at all. The substitution I'm going to make is I'm actually going to use that pineapple flavored rum that I mentioned before. So let me put this away really quick. Yep, smells like pineapples. Start with that same sour build recipe, 2 parts your base liquor. Don't get crazy, don't start changing all of these different measurements because it's going to make it harder to dial this in if it doesn't come out the way that you liked it the first time. And I am out of Coupon Martini glasses, so I'm going to show you another kind of glass that you can use. This is a Nick and Nora glass. For all intents and purposes, without getting too complicated, it is a small coupe glass. So we're going to use this one instead, which I actually prefer because especially compared to those ones, it just looks fuller in this glass. I'll show you guys what I mean here in a second. Combine these two together, you can already see it's going to be darker than it was before. Pour it up, it's in a cup. Drinking rainbow. tell you guys how this tastes. I actually expect this to be too sweet, so we'll see. Cheers, you guys. It's not too sweet, actually. Surprisingly, it is more refreshing than the first two that I made, which is a pleasant surprise. That's actually probably my favorite one of the three that I've made so far. So, once you've made that original recipe, and then you've mastered that original recipe, and you've begun iterating on that with other similar ingredients, now is a safe time to begin learning other cocktails. So I'll tell you a few that are already in the neighborhood of these same ingredients. You just have to go out to the store and get one or two more things, and you can start learning a few extra classic cocktails. So the most obvious thing, I think, is that if you go out and get mint, you have everything that you need to make a mojito. You can also go out and get club soda if you really, really want to add club soda to your mojito and make it super duper classic. If you got a dark or black strap rum like Gosling's or Kraken, then you can go out to the store and get ginger beer. Then you have everything that you need to make it dark and stormy. If you just go back to the liquor store, you can get vodka or gin, and now you have everything you need to make a gimlet. Or you could get whiskey and lemon, and using the same exact recipe, you have everything that you need to make a whiskey sour, minus the egg whites. Let's say you want to get crazy. You want to make something completely new, try something that maybe nobody has ever done before. Start with that original recipe that you had and begin adding ingredients. This is the time where it's okay to do that. Once you've made it, mastered it, and begun testing that original recipe, now you can begin adding things. What I normally do is I'll think of a liqueur that I could add to an existing recipe to enhance something in there or add an extra note or an extra component. So some of the most common ones that I think would work really well with the daiquiri are Curacao, Luxardo Maraschino, Amaro Montenegro, Aperol, and Butterfly Botanical Liqueur. You can also add other ingredients like the spice, the bitter component that was missing from this original recipe. I've seen a lot of bartenders actually use Angostura and or orange bitters, and those should be accessible at any grocery store that sells wine. And then the last thing that you could do is if you went out and you got multiple bottles of rum, you can begin mixing those different kinds of bottles, mixing light bottles and dark bottles to get your ideal flavor profile. And once you start doing that, you're most of the way to learning tiki-style drinks. All right, this is my favorite one so far, so I'll use this to demonstrate a few things. This is the extra credit. You guys have made it to the end of the video. Thank you guys, but there's more. This is the extra credit. This is the section where I'm going to teach you a few techniques to help your drinks stand out and hopefully even stand out from the kinds of drinks that you might order at a craft cocktail lounge. So the fastest, easiest thing that you can do with your garnish is you can dress up your lime wedge, lime wheel, or lime peel with something else. But the second thing you can do that is a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more fun, and a lot more impressive is making a flaming lime. So I'll show you guys how to do that really quick. So you're going to take a lime, and you can take one of the halves of the lime that you juice to make the drink if you like. Make sure that it has some room in the lime itself to actually hold some liquid. So next, you're going to want to take some sort of flammable liquor or liqueur. I'm going to be using green chartreuse because I feel like it's one of the more versatile ones that you can use. You'll know if it's flammable because it has to be at least 55% alcohol or 110 proof. So you're going to take some of this. You're just going to pour it into your lime. Be careful, make sure that your lime doesn't have any holes at the bottom or anything. Cool. Take your lime, set it on top of your drink. Take your torch, light the top of it on fire. It is very much on fire. I don't know if you guys can see that on camera. And then when you drop it off at the table, you can take a straw or something, and just to make sure that your guests don't burn themselves, you can sink it in the glass for them. If you want to demonstrate that the drink is on fire at your table, you can use some cinnamon. You can use something that sparks over the top of it. You can burn something to create some smoke if you really need to. Be wary, especially if you're doing this at work, because some places don't actually legally do not allow an open flame at a table. So just make sure that you're aware of that before you serve it. And if you're going to serve somebody something on fire, make sure that you're doing it safely. Make sure the glass doesn't get too hot, and make sure that they're aware of the danger too. So that was the first thing that I would try. Now that extra green chartreuse is going to be in here, let's see how this tastes. That's actually really good. It's a lot more botanical than I was expecting, but that's actually really good. So those are a couple of extra things that you can do with the garnish. But wait, there's more. You can also do infusions. So you can steep things in your simple syrup or in your liquor to add an extra dimension of flavor. So with your simple syrups, I would recommend stuff like mint, basil, lemon verbena. And if you're going to infuse things into your rum, then I would suggest checking out Amazon and looking up things like mulling spices, or getting powdered chai from a company like Big Train. Pick up their spice chai and add that in there. And then you're also most of the way to making something like a milk punch, which is really, really good with that. Or you could just steep tea in there if you like. Another advanced technique that takes a little bit more effort is making your own lime cordial. It's super easy, so if you guys want to see a whole video on how to make that, let me know in the comments down below. The first advanced technique to make your daiquiri stand apart is going to be clarification, which I mentioned in pretty much all of my videos. The best method for clarifying your daiquiri is probably going to be milk washing, which is basically where you add a little bit of milk to your solution, you let it curdle, which separates all the solids that are suspended in your solution, lowering its turbidity basically. Then you filter all of that off the top, and you should have a clear solution at the end of it. You can also barrel age your cocktail, but be careful whenever you're barrel aging anything that has fresh fruit juice in it. You have to make sure that it's been clarified or pasteurized or otherwise processed first, because that juice can go bad inside of your cocktail, especially inside of something like a barrel, because it's porous, so air comes and goes. So in conclusion, step 1, find your classic recipe that you really want to learn for a drink that you know you already enjoy. Step 2, learn how to manipulate that recipe with the ingredients you already have for your specific taste. Step 3, begin picking up other ingredients to iterate on that original recipe. Step 4, pick up new ingredients to make new drinks. And then step 5 is all that extra credit, all of that extra stuff that makes your drinks stand out apart from everyone else's. So, thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you for all of your help and support. Hopefully, I've been helpful and supportive for you all as well. If any of you learned anything, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment what drinks you want to make at home, and I'll see you guys in the next video.